Hi there, folks. My name is Mariah Hardy, and I am one of the coaches with the Leaders Framework. Today, I'm going to be going over our Cohort 2 subject, which is the pillars of psychological safety and trust. Just to review, if you've been with James for any amount of time, we love the we love the Leaders Framework, but we love five dysfunctions of a team. This is Pat Lencioni's framework to really illuminate what are the elements, the ingredients to create a cohesive team. Pat Lencioni has spent a ton of time researching what makes teams work and what makes them fall apart. So then over on the right, you can see the elements of a dysfunctional team. Today, we're really going to focus on that bottom layer, on that cohesive team triangle, which is trust. We're going to, in future cohorts, go through conflict, accountability, commitment, and thus ultimately getting to results. But today, we're focusing right there on trust. If you're familiar with the term psychological safety, you may be also familiar with Google's Project Aristotle, which is where I believe the term was coined from. Google hired a team of people to come in and basically do a huge research project to figure out what is it that makes teams cohesive and work. What are the teams that are the most innovative, that are the most efficient? What are the elements that create that team dynamic? For a while there, they thought maybe it could be a team with the leader who has the longest tenure. Maybe it's a team with the brightest minds from the most prestigious universities. But what they found when they really dug into what was making the teams inside of Google succeed and what was making other ones fail was the core element of psychological safety. So, their definition of psychological safety is the shared belief held by members of a team that it's okay to take risks, to express their ideas and concerns, to speak up with questions, and to admit mistakes, all without fear of negative consequence. Now, this is not saying that there's no negative consequences on a team. Obviously, if you have a team member or you are a team member that is consistently missing deadlines, consistently being really harsh in communication, consistently underperforming, there's natural negative consequences to that. This is not what that is talking about. This is talking about in the ideation phase, in the different processes of bringing a product to launch, there is a shared belief that everybody is allowed to try something that may be risky, that is able to bring up something that they're like, I don't feel, I have concerns about this without feeling like there's going to be some punishment on the other side. So we went through Project Aristotle. We went through other companies. Pixar is a great example who have a history of psychological safety. We kind of mined through it to figure out what are those ingredients. We're calling them pillars of a psychologically safe environment and a psychologically safe team. The elements that we found were the ones here on the screen. I'm sure that we could add more if we wanted, but this was already a large slide, so we had to be choosy. You are able to read these, but some of these definitions are maybe different than what you would expect. So I'm just going to briefly go through them, hopefully to provide a little bit more insight in the explanation. So resilience, we are going to talk about in another, I believe it's our next cohort, but oftentimes we think of resilience as the ability to overcome after something challenging has happened or the ability to push through something that's hard. And that is definitely a definition of resilience. Here on a team, we're talking more about the ability, once we have that stress peak, the threat response that we all have naturally that goes on in our nervous system, how can we emotionally come back down to our more regulated self where our prefrontal cortex is on? Again, we're going to go into that more, but that's our logic center, our ability to connect with one another, our ability to think through problems when we're in stress. I'm sure you all know sometimes it's hard to to think through problems as efficiently as when you're feeling a bit more regulated. And so that's the resilience that we're talking about, the ability to come back down emotionally. Uh, Ownership is one of my favorites. The ability to take responsibility for your actions and decisions without shame or blame. I also think it's the ability to see how you've affected somebody, how you've affected a project, and obviously not necessarily meaning to. Oftentimes, I think I strongly believe most of our intentions are good most of the time. But it's still being able to be like, even though my intentions were good, I can see how I negatively affected this, and I can own that without being bad. Respect is not necessarily Aretha Franklin's version of this. It's just more the idea that we are going to value that there's a separate set of perspectives on the other side in another person that are very different from mine, or might be the same, but they're presenting differently, and that I can respect that those are just as valid as my own. Feedback is another one that we're going to go into more. But providing and receiving constructive feedback is paramount to creating a psychologically safe team. There is nothing worse than feeling the energy tension where you know something's wrong, but nobody's saying anything. And that actually creates a divisive environment. It's challenging to come in that with an open heart, an open mind, open thought, and be able to work together as a cohesive team when you're feeling that, like, is everything okay? Feeling inside of a room. So feedback is a great tool to kind of to cut that out. Curiosity is one that we need for all of these, but it's that engaging in thoughtful questions, knowing I don't know all of the answers to what your experience is. If I respect that you have a different perspective, different experience, then I can't pretend to know what is going on inside of you. So curiosity is coming to someone and being like, hey, when this happened, the thought in my head was that you were upset with me, but I also recognize maybe I don't have the whole story. Am I missing something, or were you upset with me? And is there something that we need to talk through? I'm really open to that. It's really disarming. Like when somebody comes in with curiosity and they're wanting to know my experience and they're wanting to know, hey, I don't know the whole story. Can you help fill in the blanks for me? Or that felt kind of off to me, but I'm really open to hearing, did you feel off, or is that what you meant? It's such a great building block to paving a road for the person on the other side to take ownership, because they don't have to be on the defensive if you're coming in curiosity, and vice versa. It's very nice to be met with curiosity. Clarity is pretty self-explanatory, but clearly communicating what we're want our expectations, our experiences, our feelings, so there's not confusion on the other end. Humility would be the pillar that says, I know that I am fallible, and I know that you are fallible. And so we are going to make mistakes. We're going to fail. We're both part of, if there's a tough relational dynamic, two people are contributing to it. It's so easy to be like, that person's so hard to work with, but they're probably also feeling like I'm hard to work with. And so humility is like, sometimes I'm probably great to work with, and there's other parts of me that are probably harder to work with. And so when I'm bumping up against somebody else's parts that are harder to work with, I can have a bit more compassion, knowing that maybe we're not the same, but we're both human in that. And then lastly, vulnerability, such a tough one. This is Brene Brown. She's a researcher out of the University of Houston, Texas, I believe. But she is researches shame and vulnerability. And her definition is showing up and being seen without being able to control the outcome. It's uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, which obviously we read that and think, want no part of it. But the truth is, there's obviously, we're in a workplace, so there's a level of vulnerability that's appropriate and inappropriate. But Google's Project Aristotle found that teams that have a level of vulnerability where it's, I know you. I know that you're a good person, and I know that you're maybe going through a hardship right now. So when maybe you dropped the ball a little bit, or maybe you were a little sharp in your response to me. Because of your vulnerability, I already have buy-in to you. I already have trust built with you, and I'm able to come to you without as much defenses and talk through, hey, this affected me, but also in a safer, more connected way than if there hadn't been that safety and trust built through a vulnerable experience. So you're welcome to pause the video or just think about it for a few seconds here, but um, I'm curious what thoughts are as we've gone through this, the different pillars to create a psychologically safe environment. What do you notice barriers are to that get in the way of creating that environment? What are some elements that you would notice? Maybe they're ones that you've experienced in previous workplaces and current workplaces. Maybe they're ones that you could own and be like, oh yeah, I really struggle at that one, and I go to this, and that actually I notice does sometimes it's hard to work with. It does not create a psychologically safe environment. We came up with a few. Obviously, this is probably a pretty exhaustive list, or this is not an exhaustive list. There's probably lots more we could add, but just want to highlight a few. The blame culture is the idea of like, this is your fault. This is your problem. I am not to blame. This is not on me. And again, just the way that humans are wired, we have mirror neurons. We have a nervous system that's reacting constantly to threat inside of our world. And we're also a pretty terrible observer of ourselves. Um, it is really hard to have any situation happen, specifically interpersonally, where it's not at least partly both parties' responsibility. I've been in situations where I'm like, whoa, I was so messy. That was 90% me. But I have a team member that was like, yeah, but I felt cold to you. And so you might have been reacting to my coldness. And that felt really, that like maybe made it harder to work with me. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I still can own how I was, um, how I responded to you, but her owning, I was a contributor. I was a part of this is how you get out of blame culture. Um, the lack of awareness, I think, kind of falls into that. I think humility is so important inside of this, is just recognizing that we are all fallible and we're all going to make mistakes. And there's actually a lot of safety in owning that. It doesn't actually keep us safer by pointing the finger and blaming. And even if it's not directly to the person, even if it's in your own in your own soul or with your group, anytime that we're saying that is the problem, it disseminates or it removes trust. It breaks apart trust. It breaks apart a healthy culture. And then lastly, only focusing on the wins is one that I've heard SAIC loves to do. So um, and I love celebrating wins. That's not what we're saying. Celebrating wins are so important. But on the other side, a psychologically safe environment is able to look at the places where they've screwed up, failed, planning didn't go according to plan, that the project fell on its face, we screwed up. Getting to really look at it, it's painful, but psychologically safe environments or teams are very open to the idea that failure is inevitable. We are going to fail. And so let's mine the gold out of every failure so that we can be more productive, more successful in the future. So for homework, I would love for you to go through those pillars of a psychologically safe team. Look through them and see if you can find one that could be an area of growth for you and commit to it. You could write down 3 ways that you could implement it. I just always think it's like the idea is nice, but let's have an action plan as well. For me, curiosity has been one that I have recognized I need to grow in. I've been in the emotional health space for a ton of years. And so when a situation happens to me or I'm in the middle of something that feels sticky, it's easy for me to try and psychoanalyze the person on the other side. And probably the closer they are to me, the more wrong I am about what was actually going on. But it's not fun to feel like you're on the other side of somebody already knowing what you meant, already knowing your intention, already knowing all those things. And so I recognize that as an area of growth inside of relationship for me, inside of a work environment. So uh, now, one of the ways I've implemented growth and curiosity is every feedback conversation, every conflict I go into, I have three really curious, really kind, really there's not a lot of certainty in my questions, in terms of like I'm not giving anybody any leading questions that's trying to um, get them to, I'm not trying to lead them somewhere. So that question might be like, could you give me more information on what you meant in when you said this? There's part of a story I'm probably missing here. Could you help me understand what's going on? Hey, was that comment directed at me? I was unclear if you were feeling upset with me or if I just misinterpreted that. Could you give me some clarity there? And so having questions prepared beforehand before going into it has helped me a ton because in the moment I just want to ask like, why do you hate me? And that's not a super helpful question. So then my second piece of homework for you this month is I want you to go through some moments. I want you to pay attention, and see if you can find one place where you saw the psychologically safe pillars in practice, and just write down how it went. Did it affect it in a positive way? Could they have used more? What's going on there? And what was your experience with that? And then on the flip side of it, I'd like you to look through if you can find one place where maybe some of those psychologically safe pillars were needed. And how did that go? If you have any questions, if you're like, hey, I need to grow in ownership, but I actually can't think of three ways to grow in it, I need help, we are here for you. So feel free. My email is mariah@theleadersframework.com. You could always email james@theleadersframework.com. It is our desire to support you, to help you. We are here to be a resource for anything that you need in this arena. So don't hesitate to reach out. We believe in you and so grateful to be a part of this cohort. Thanks.